Welcome to the Good Faith Bible Studies podcast. I'm your host, Craig Nash, Senior Editor at Good Faith Media. Each episode, we explore and discuss the weekly texts and lessons found in Good Faith magazine. For the July, August, and September 2026 installment of the Bible Studies, I'll be inviting special guests to join me in sharing our thoughts and ideas about the passage and ways small groups might approach each week's lesson. We are glad you're here, so let's dive in. This week's passage is from Luke chapter 12, verses 35 through 38. Be dressed, ready for service, and keep your lamps burning, like servants waiting for their master to return from a wedding banquet, so that when he comes and knocks, they can immediately open the door for him. It will be good for those servants whose master finds them watching when he comes. Truly, I tell you, he will dress himself to serve, will have them recline at the table, and will come and wait on them. It will be good for those servants whose master finds them ready, even if he comes in the middle of the night or toward daybreak. So a few initial thoughts about this passage. Last week, we talked about parables that kind of feel out of the blue without much context, where Jesus is just talking and then he kind of goes into a parable, and others where there's a story that sets up the parable. Such as when Jesus saw, this was from, I think, 2 weeks ago, when Jesus saw the disdain on the face of Simon the Pharisee at the woman who wept over Jesus's feet. Then he launched into the story of the two debtors. This parable today, which we could call the parable of the Watchful Servants, feels a little bit like both, a little in between. On the one hand, it is part of a longer narrative that began with the story we told last week, where a brother asked Jesus to settle an inheritance dispute. But on the other hand, it doesn't seem to have much to do with that, or does it? Peter gives voice to this confusion later when he asked Jesus. We don't cover this verse here, but Peter asked Jesus, essentially, who are you talking to? We also talked at the beginning of the series about how there's disagreement over what constitutes a parable. Is it a fully formed story, or do metaphors count? And this kind of falls in between both of those as well. And then just full disclosure for those of you who have read the curriculum in Good Faith magazine, we probably should have continued through to verse 40 because that's the more complete reading of this passage, but we didn't. But we still think we can garner some good conversation with verses 35 through 38. And when we return, we will have a conversation with my special guest for the week. Welcome back. I'm happy to introduce to you our special guest for a week, who I just remembered has written a lesson for us a couple of years ago, I believe, when we were still nurturing faith Bible studies. Our guest today is Andie Pellicer, who is the pastor of University Baptist Church here in Waco, Texas, which is the church I attend. Andie is my pastor. So, Andie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Can you share with our audience just a little bit about you, your life, your work, things that you enjoy?
Yeah. So I've been here at UBC almost 3 years. I am a native Washingtonian, so big change being in Texas, but have really loved it. I've been married to my partner for 22 years. I think that's correct. Wow. He would know more than me. He's better at that. We have 4 incredible daughters. Love my work here at UBC. Feel really passionate about understanding biblical context, understanding how we can take what we're reading, what we're seeing, what we're experiencing, and applying them faithfully to the way we live our lives.
That's great. And for our listener, Andie is an incredible pastor, an incredible preacher, and far more capable to talk through scripture than I am. A little self-deprecating there, but I truly believe it. She's just incredible. So, Andie, what are some of your initial impressions about this passage?
Yeah, this passage is complicated because of the language of slaves.
Yes.
So acknowledging that straight away. But it's very Luke in nature and flavor. It's very typical Luke to take somebody who has been marginalized, who has been pushed out, and to show how Jesus will flip that on its head and include. And so this passage is very special. It demonstrates Jesus's desire to take those that maybe society is not interested in or doesn't see or see value in and place them in a position of honor, and specifically related to the way that they are anticipating the needs of the one that they're to be serving. The flip side of that, I really appreciate what Mary Alice has written here. I think there is this need to be ready. And also, we live in a time with a lot of anxiety, a lot of overstimulation, a lot of overwhelm. And so I think about the way this passage also speaks to the kind of waiting that brings peace, which is a very different thing than this like frantic, over-serving, over-pouring, over-investment to the point of burnout. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I actually wrote those down as my notes, that this is a thing that I appreciated most about Mary Alice, the way she kind of unpacked the passage is, for me, as an Enneagram 6, and I know some of our audience will know what that is, some won't, it doesn't really matter, but as someone who's like always thinking, who's always preparing, always thinking, always preparing, usually for the worst thing that could possibly happen. I read this passage, and I've always read this passage with anxiety leading the way of, and of course I have carried with that dispensationalism that I grew up with, this Jesus is going to come, you better not be doing anything bad, you better be prepared. If you're not, bad things could happen. And so that just always tinged to the way I read this passage. And Mary Alice essentially said, watching and waiting and being on the lookout can focus more on attention than on fear.
Yes. When I was a youth pastor, and I should not admit this to your listeners, but we had this joke, and I would, we'd be at a pool party or we'd be at camp or whatever. And, a student was wearing something that at that time we thought maybe they shouldn't wear. And we would go, do you want Jesus to come back and you're wearing that? And it was joking, yes. But also there was this anxious moment of like, what if Jesus catches me doing something? And that's so different than this idea that the master in this passage is looking to his servants to do something right and to do something good, as opposed to waiting to catch them out for doing the wrong thing.
And it, of course, we always associated those things we don't want to be caught with sex, the body, things that, and this passage is actually a great example of this and how Mary Alice spoke to it. No pastor I ever had said, you don't want Jesus to come back at a time when you're doing something that exploits the poor. Or you don't want Jesus to come back when you have anger in your heart.
Yeah.
It's always, are you wearing the right thing?
That's
are you
right.
watching, listening to the right thing?
Right. What are your thoughts in that moment when you see Jesus? Because he knows.
Yeah.
He's like Santa. He sees you when you're sleeping.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I love how Mary Alice pointed this out, that the reason we can see, the intent here, and this, I completely have missed this in the hundreds of times I've read this over the course of my life, is at the end of this is that the master comes, sees them attentive, and the master serves them.
Yeah.
And this is where you spoke about, and we talked at the beginning of this series in Luke about kind of the upside down kingdom. And Luke is always flipping these things on the end.
Yes.
And that I like to call these M. Night Shyamalan moments.
I love that.
So listeners, hopefully you are aware of M. Night Shyamalan, the director. He's kind of lost his step, I think, in recent years, but it's hard to keep that up, where his whole shtick was creating these incredible stories that at the end you find out something like The Sixth Sense. I'm sorry, it's 30 years old. You should already know this.
That's right.
That at the end you realize that the main character's dead the whole time. It's just kind of this flipping on the end. So this is like a perfect, like you said, Lucan parable.
Yes.
You've led a lot of small groups. You've preached, you walk people through pastoral care. If you were talking through this passage, I imagine some of the things you would say we've already said here, but how would you approach a small group that's studying this passage?
I would encourage people studying this in a group to think of where they can be active waiters, and not just active, again, fueled by anxiety or stress or perfectionism. But as somebody who's done a tremendous amount of waiting, I mean, our youngest two are almost 5, but they're twins. They were adopted, and we waited 10 years. And that wait, the culmination of that wait was sheer unadulterated joy. And so I do think that there is something really powerful about looking at the places in our own lives and as a community, as a small group studying together, where waiting does something really, really powerful. And so whether that is, you're waiting on a life circumstance to change, you're waiting on a relationship to change, you're waiting for something that feels far away, that waiting time can sometimes, not always, but can sometimes really reinforce like the joy and the beauty when something materializes, whether it's the thing that you intended or not. And that's just the heart of Christ for us, to bring something beautiful out of something that can feel tiresome or ordinary or boring. And we are in ordinary times in the lectionary.
Yeah, certainly.
And
That's
so,
a great point.
yeah, I think that's an important way that we can practice active, peaceful waiting.
Yeah, no, such a great connection to ordinary time. I always remind folks who are maybe new to the lectionary, which many of our Baptist audience might be, many are not. Ordinary doesn't mean ordinary.
That's right.
It means we're counting.
Yeah.
And we're like paying attention to the numbers of days after Pentecost and until Christ the King Sunday.
Yes.
I agree. I think maybe a good just kind of conversation piece is you named waiting on your twins to arrive. So maybe ask people in the group things that they've waited for and talk about the payoff, but also talk about all the things you had to do leading up and how that was hard work. Tearing down the fourth wall. We usually record these a few weeks before you hear them. I'm getting ready to go on vacation. And the last 2 weeks of my life have been really hard, like just getting everything ready. And I've got in mind the payoff, but it is a lot of work.
Yes.
Just like this passage, like Jesus through Luke was commending the attention to detail.
Yes, absolutely.
To that. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're actually going to have you for next week's lesson as well. So we will return with another episode of Good Faith Bible Studies next week.
Thank you, Craig.
Thank you. I'm Craig Nash, and you've been listening to the Good Faith Bible Studies podcast from Good Faith Media. Our music comes from Pond 5. If you are not already a subscriber to Good Faith Magazine, learn more about how you can receive a copy of the magazine and Bible study curriculum at goodfaithmedia.org.